Today, I'm going to discuss on detachment and surrendering. And while I've personally struggled to pull all this together as a talk, the universe has been more than generous with its abundance and wisdom. Started with Lisa, where we had this beautiful talk on surrendering and detachment. And then I had multiple conversations with Cassie. I have another mentor, Jorge from Ecuador, Kitsani from Texas, and then my father. And it really helped me kind of connect the power of surrendering. Altogether, I had 6 pages of notes before I even started to pull this together. I know for many of us, the concept of surrendering can be triggering, right? Like it's this loss of power that we have, and it's like, how do we pull that together? And for me, there's specifically on detachment and surrendering, I like to think of detachment as practicing on learning how to surrender. And it's if you struggle with surrender, coming back and just taking baby steps with detachment is a really good place to start. Even after reading lots of books, I still struggle to find a way to truly embrace surrendering. So I'll start with the definition in a spiritual sense of detachment. It's the practice of maintaining an inner calm and balance regardless of the outside circumstances. Right? Like we surrender, we detach from what's happening. And being content and at peace without relying on specific outcomes. And I'll get into that more about this trusting of the outcomes, specifically even with relationships. A question to ponder is, how can one actually become comfortable with detachment and surrendering? And specifically on the path of how something manifests. Right? Like when you set the intent and you're like, I would like this in my life, and if you get really specific and you want like all the steps to happen in a certain area, like you kind of resist the flow of surrendering together. And then there's even a bigger leap, and that's like even releasing from the outcome. And I'll get more into that too. Personally, I found being humble is an important part of surrendering. It actually came up in all the talks that I had with the different people. It might seem a little surprising, so I'm going to start with some quotes. Kitsani shared, "To me, the word surrender is to be humble. Humble to the divine, humble about our possessions, and humble to others." And then she shared some wisdom from her grandmother. And her grandmother would always say, "What do you have that's above others?" And then she'd say, "Not much," right? Putting you into that place of being humble. Jorge, what's that?
Hearing aid.
Oh, okay. I know, it sounds like a lightsaber. Is it? Do I need to speak louder then?
Does he need to speak louder?
What? No.
Does he?
I'll bring it up a little bit. Okay, Jorge shared, if you know how to surrender, you're going to learn how to set the perfect intention while being grateful and humble. The reason being humble is foundational piece of detachment is without it, we tend to question every step along the manifestation, which not only increases our internal stress, right, but we feel it in our body, but it drives those around us crazy, right? Yeah. And it also kind of reduces the universe's, not to limit the universe, but it reduces the universe's ability to manifest your intent in a way that's for your highest good. Because you're just saying, like, I want it only this way. And I love to say, don't limit infinity. And so when you open up, right, you're honoring infinity in that way. And I find it helpful to connect with being humble by looking inwards and recognizing, and this is like my personal thought, is that I only really have clear memories, for me personally, maybe others are different, of this lifetime. And most of those memories and things were taught to me by someone else. And then if I dive even further into that, there's the science part, I ask myself, how much can I really be right or sure about anything, because most of what was taught to me was a copy of someone's original thought. Right? And so then I'm left with what I have with me right now. There's a big thing about infinity in me. Then I expand out to infinity, and I consider, even if I had the knowledge of all the humans that have ever lived on this planet, it would only be a fraction of all seen and unseen. Right? Just putting it back into that perspective to help with humbling. For me, humble also is radiated by the word namaste, which translates to, I honor in you that I honor in me. When one says namaste, it symbolizes honoring the divine and inherent spirit within others. This acknowledgement of the soul in another is an act of respect and honoring and humility and recognizing that all beings are equal in essence. And I like to elevate it even further. And that is by treasuring the combination of like this unique lifetime that you have, that you bring with your divine soul, right? Like this is one unique place. And so this reminded me of a thought I had a long time ago, is I didn't understand why people would give like rock and movie stars so much attention. So I turned it inwards, and then it hit me is that personally I'll use it as like, I will look at each one of you, right, as your own unique star, right? Like you're unique, right? Like to me, each of you are a rock star or a movie star, whatever you prefer. And so that helps me in that humbling part. And then turning inward, yet once again, Cassiophyson shares the wisdom of repeating to oneself that I'm an average tree in a beautiful forest. Which is just like, then when you're there, right, then as we humble ourselves, and those are practices you can try and see if they resonate with your heart, we start to trust in all that is, right? We see the magic in what everyone brings to the table. And for many of us, it can be humbling. For many of us, when we start to detach and we no longer specifically command that every step is supposed to be taken in a certain order, we're actually surprised that the outcome's better than we would have expected, right? That's where we let the infinite divine power come through and surprise us. Next thing is feeling safe is really a critical aspect of detachment. I think it's one of the things that trips us up from even exploring it, right? Like, how does one actually just let go when they don't even feel safe? Maybe someday someone can do a better speech on this piece, but this is what I had. So when we feel safe, it becomes easier to let go and embrace detachment. Imagine attempting to relax on a rickety bridge suspended over a deep ravine. For many of you, that's probably triggering in many different ways, right? It can be nearly impossible. But however, if you're on solid ground, right, you can easily loosen your grip and fully surrender into the moment. Achieving a sense of safety can be challenging, especially when concerns loom large in our lives. And we can see this in, like some core areas like financial stability, right? Like it's hard to really relax when you're just not sure how you're going to pay your bills. Physical and mental health, right? Like if you have an injury or something, like it just constantly radiates. And then, how our relationships are doing with friends and family. To navigate these challenges, I've discovered 2 effective paths. You can try them and then suggest better ones too, is select an aspect of your life that you feel safe in. So start small, right? By beginning and practicing detachment in an area where you already feel safe. This makes it easier for you to build up the skill of detachment in a safe environment and feel what it feels like. I think there's part of that embracing. And it makes it easier to apply it in other more challenging areas. The next one is to actually just visualize a safe space. Right? For a lot of us, it's even hard to just be in a safe space. And if we can find that safe space, or that place where we feel utterly safe, then we can mentally practice this concept of detaching then. So even if it's imaginary, it's a good place to start. Next, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and explore what it feels like to surrender. When you detach from the intent, like you set the intent that you want something, when you detach from the manifestation, and like I said earlier, the outcome, you're trusting the infinite part of you to consider all the possible paths, seen and unseen. Back to the science part, for me it's like seeing this ultimate supercomputer that's programmed to do all the work, move all the pieces in my life, and deliver an outcome that's for my highest good. You can really trust in that. Another way to think about detachment is to think when you are setting an intention, you're asking a dear friend who has infinite knowledge and infinite love for you to look through all time and space and supervise the manifestation for your highest good. And you can so trust your dear friend that you even accept a different outcome from what you had asked, because you know it's for your highest good. Late last night, this came to me. So, which is captured, and it's my version of Garth Brooks' song, Unanswered Prayers. All right. Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. Remember when we were talking to the woman upstairs, that just because he doesn't answer doesn't mean she don't care. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. Right? That's that part where we just, and of course it's in a country song. All right. Now I invite you to turn outwards, feeling what surrendering to all that is, or even more challenging for a lot of us, is surrendering to another person. When you surrender, you are saying that I honor you. It's like this deep trust. It just came through. I'm not saying just blindly surrender to anyone, right? Like that trust has to be earned. But once that trust is earned, right, you can start small in surrendering even with friends. And I know that can be a big leap. And when you say that, you say, I trust you, and I feel safe after setting the intention, and this can be Source, God, whatever your highest good is, right? That you give them, the steering wheel to your life after you set the intention, and you know it's going to end up for the highest good. And then, interestingly, it came back to me, is that this actually ties back to unconditional love, right? Is that you know that they love you no matter what, and that you trust them no matter what. And so you're saying that I love you unconditionally, and you know that they also love you unconditionally. All right, now I'm going to shift to a personal moment of surrender for me. I have a red Nissan and a blue tractor, and they have been in the shop more than they have been out. My Nissan, I think it's 14 months ago, I decided to actually get a new rebuilt motor put in it. And I easily returned it over 10 times, where the check engine light would come on. Then they finally figured out that engine was defective. And so they got a new engine about 2 months ago, and day one, that new engine was leaking oil also. So, and then, so that got fixed, and I was taking, my daughter goes to school on Monday, and I didn't know this, but then it started running bad, and the check engine light started flashing, which is apparently really bad. So, I dropped off the truck yet again, and maybe it's another new engine, I don't know. But like, personally, throughout this, like, I would surrender, right? Like, I set the intent that I saw the truck and the tractor, which are both still in the shop now. I saw them where they were running, and I was having fun with them, and then I just released it, and I really didn't get angry, but I must be angry at some level because I could see it mirrored in others around me. They're like, "Why don't you get more angry?" So at some level, it's there, but enough that it's outside of me. And and so then. And I heard my fair share of guidance from loving others. It's time to put the truck and tractor out to pasture, which isn't so bad. So, and I took this one seriously because then I was like, okay, I've surrendered, what else? So then I turned inwards. And Cassie helps me we do like meditations over the phone. And so I wanted to kind of get to the core of what was going on here. And so I have a couple mentors that I can do this with. Cassie and I can do like astral body projection where we see each other in these guided meditations and we work together. It's pretty amazing. And it's amazing for me in healing. And so we both focused on the original waves of this chaos. And Cassie got a message, which was a hope for something that will never happen. It was related to me back in my 20s. So then I was pulled back, and I knew what it was. My youngest brother, Stuart, and his best friend, Ryan, were killed by a drunk driver on the way home from track practice on a snowy day in April. And then, and I went back, and for those and then it hit me. And that was when my brother passed. I spent a lot of time in the shower, kind of like trying to will him back to existence. And what I didn't know then, which was clear now, is I have this deep connection with water. And that when I infuse energy into water, and it was so emotional back then, like I brought it to life. And so then there's this other discernment part, right? When you're deep in the magic, and both Cassie and I, I went back and I honored the pain that I had, right? Which I just maybe hadn't at that level. And I also honored my brother's path, right? It was his decision at some level that it was his path. And knowing how much I can energetically, and we can all do it, but energetically with that much energy impact the water, right? I also sent the water back then, unconditional love. And at that moment, both Cassie and I felt like this huge release within me. And so I call my parents like I typically do on Saturdays. And I share all the magic stuff with them, so they're great. I'm really grateful for that. But I asked them to sit down on this one. And so I shared that journey that I just had with them. And then my dad said something unexpected. But his gifts are always also coming in, so it's beautiful. And he said, when you surrender, you are leaving the things that are causing you issues to go where it should. And to hear that come through my dad about my brother and the whole situation, And like he was like, he had to sit down, right? And then he just continued. He's like, even if it's gut wrenching, there's a pleasure in knowing that it can go where it should be going. And like this is like, right? This is that another facet of surrendering, because we're sending that love and we're honoring those around us. Sharing messages. So another thing that's taught me about surrendering is when messages come through me. I recently joined, thanks to Charles, I recently joined online circles. And one of the online circles is where you get this opportunity to practice with others. And it's beautiful, it's all Zoom, and then usually like we'll do like a 2-minute meditation before we go into the Zoom. And so I was doing a 2-minute, and you'll pair up with one person, sometimes two. But and before that, all of a sudden I got this huge, like, energetic hit where all of a sudden my heart started hurting. I could feel in my legs like this deep, which connects for me is like someone has really bad circulation in their legs. And then there was a male presence, so I asked if it was a brother, I got a no. I asked if it was a father, and I got a yes. And then I also get messages from people that are alive. And so I asked, are you alive? And I got yes. But then my logical mind kicked in. And so when the Zoom, right, when the person popped into Zoom, I like had this whole message for them. And they're in their late 70s. And I'm thinking, and so in my mind I'm like, there's no way their father's still alive. So instead of saying something like, giving a message and saying, what I got is your father's alive and he currently has both heart and circulation issues. Does that resonate with you? Instead, I asked a question, right? Is your father still alive? And there's this interesting thing that when messages come through you, it really is teaching you this beautiful part of surrender, because you don't know, right? Like you're even struggling with how can these messages be true? And then time and time again, someone confirms something that you would have, there's no way you could know, right? Like I've never met this person before, this Zoom, and to have this. And so that's another part of surrendering. And then Lisa and I did this amazing, we were doing a meditation in entering the void. And but at the end, we were talking about both detachment and surrendering. So then, divinely guided, I got the thought of, let's try to go back in by holding surrender. And for both of us, it might be different for you, usually when entering the void, it's still and it's vast. But when we both entered with surrender, with the intent of surrender, it was flowing. And like for Lisa, it was moving and you had the sense of like wind and flowing with it. And for me, I had this beautiful sense of being part of the water and flowing through the currents and the eddies. And so like I wanted to share that, is that really like another visual of surrendering is this beautiful flow with all that intelligence. And it just flows through all the different possibilities, pulling us back together. All right. And I'm going to end on one part of surrendering that I'm still actively discovering. And that is, in my life now, I'm surrendering so frequently in different places that I started to question, like, where do I exist? Right? Because it just so flows through me. And that's nothing that I've read in a book, so it's like, where do you go? So, of course, I asked Cassie for help. And so we've been having, conversations around this and trying to dive into, like, where do you really exist when you completely surrender, even if it's for a moment. And once again, one of these magical quests that Cassie and I went on, we were returning something that we had hidden in a past lifetime. And after we had it with us, there was a decision point that we reached, and all those magical gifts dissolved, right? There's no more hints. this happens to me with pendulums all the time, or it's starting lately, is I'll ask a question and then the pendulum goes still and they won't give me an answer. So I got to figure it out for myself. And so it was that same point. And then when we did that, right, what do we have left? Right? We have this unique version of us, right? And the truth that we have right now. And then I was reminded, oh, that's what I have left, right? Like it boils down to this beautiful truth. And that I get to make decisions. And the universe so honors us that it actually wants our input, our input at certain points. And let's see, and there's a deep beauty that when we surrender to the light of all that is coming through us, it's just as beautiful when that light flows through us, right? And radiates through our like unique crystalline body, right? Out into the universe and sharing like our presence with all. And so that's my talk on surrender.